What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. Every region in Pokemon has their own set of monsters they introduce to the world, and many of those do remain a single type, but plenty of them also have two different types. However, every so often there are Pokemon that are designed in such a way that they seem to embody more than simply two types in the chart, and they could in fact be triple typed. I mean, I guess any dual type from Paldea could technically be triple typed with Terastallizing, but I'm talking about three at the same time, and what exactly mixing those three types together would mean. So let's find out with number 6, Sandy Shocks. Okay, first of all, how are all of the future Paradox Pokemon not Steel-type? I get why they're not, because that would be pretty boring, but they're all literally made of metal. How is that not a Steel-type, but a Meowth is? I just don't get the double standards here. But obviously it would be a bit harder for the past variants to get in on the Steel-typing, yet they decided to go out of their way to make it out of place by including a Magneton. Or I guess it's going by Sandy Shocks now. But of all the Pokemon out there, this is possibly the most made out of metal. And they didn't even really change that, actually adding more metal to it. So obviously this past walking magnet should have retained its Steel-type status. Now that's not to say that I'm unhappy with its current typing, because Electric and Ground is actually not bad, only having weaknesses to Grass, Ice, Water, and Ground, with resistances to Rock, Poison, Flying, Steel, and it's immune to Electric. But of course, the Steel type has its advantages, only having weaknesses to Fire, Fighting, and Ground, but it resists Normal, Ice, Bug, Psychic, Flying, Grass, Fairy, Dragon, Rock, Steel, and is completely immune to Poison. So if you put that together with the original Sandy Shocks typing, it gets weaknesses to Fire, Water, and Fighting, with an 8 times weakness to Ground, so that is a big sore spot. But besides that, it's not that much, especially compared to the resistances of Psychic, Bug, Normal, Dragon, Fairy, Quad resistances to Rock, Flying, and Steel, and immunities to Poison and Electric. Again, I think that might be worth the trade-off for the 8 times Ground. I mean, honestly, what's the difference in taking 200% and 300% damage anyway? I know I said that we should have more Electric and Ground types, and I still think that we should, but not at the expense of basic logic in stripping away a type that should be critical for this Pokemon's very existence. Number 5, Low Kicks. Listen, this Pokemon isn't one of my favorites, but I don't hate it either. It's at least a lot better than Spidops, I'll tell you that. But it is noteworthy for being the first ever Bug and Dark type. Yes, it is insane that they made it until Gen 9 without pairing these two together, but they are weak to Flying, Fairy, Fire, Bug, and Rock, and they resist Grass, Ground, Ghost, Dark, and they're immune to Psychic. So it is fairly even. But honestly, I don't truly understand why it's a Dark type at all. Shouldn't it be a Fighting type? Maybe I'm missing something about it with the TV show that it's based on, but I'm pretty sure their superheroes aren't supposed to be part evil. If anything, Fighting is considered the good type in Japan, so it would have fit a lot more. Not to mention that Low Kicks learns more Fighting type moves through level up than it does Dark anyway, and it learns the new Axe Kick attack, which isn't quite signature to it, but it is the only new Pokemon that can learn it. I'm not saying that we should have no Bug and Dark types out there, but I am saying that Fighting fits just as much. So Fighting is weak to Psychic, Flying, and Fairy, and it resists Rock, Bug, and Dark. So when you mix them all into one, it would make Low Kicks weak to Fire, and then the rest would shake out to only Quad weaknesses to Flying and Fairy. It could be worse because it would also resist Grass, Ghost, Ground, Quad resist Dark, and be totally immune to Psychic. Sure, those 4 times liabilities are something to look out for, but it's really surprising how much these types do kind of cancel out. And it just makes sense that a powerful Bug that's all about kicking would specialize in that Fighting type style. Number 4, Quaval. So I don't always have a starter in these videos, but every now and then there's one that has so much going on that it should probably get another type. And I would say that the final stage of the Quaxly line would qualify. Obviously this Waterfowl is the Water type starter, but when it evolves fully it gains the Fighting type as well. This results in weaknesses to Grass, Flying, Electric, Psychic, and Fairy, but with resistances to Water, Dark, Rock, Bug, Fire, Ice, and Steel, so it's not bad. However, I do think that it could be appropriate to add the Flying type to this line as well. Now, for all those people taking the names of the Pokemon types far too literally, flying Pokemon do not always have to fly. It's more of a sky or a wind type. But if anything, it's still more of the remnants of the bird type that it replaced before Gen 1. So with a bird who dances with all the colors of the wind, with a wardrobe design mixed between the sea and the sky, it makes sense to me that Quaval could have another type up its long leg sleeves. Or also, once again, the fact that it gains more flying type moves through level up than it does fighting anyway. So the flying type is weak to electric, ice, and rock, and it resists grass bug fighting and is immune to ground. So it's not often seen by itself, but adding it to the original water and fighting, it results in weaknesses to psychic, flying, fairy, and be quad weak to electric, with all the rest cancelling out. And it would resist water, fire, fighting, dark, steel, quad resist bug, and be immune to ground. So maybe 3 types wouldn't be all that fair to the other starters of the Paldea region, but I have heard numerous people say that this dancing duck has been their least favorite starter in a long while, if not ever, so I think that we should do a little something nice for Quaval, right? Number 3, Corydon. Again, it's pretty weird that Miraidon isn't a steel type when it's literally made of metal. Also, it's extra weird that it's clearly much bigger than a regular Cyclizar when all the other future Pokemon are supposed to be smaller, but we're not here to talk about the Violet mascot, we are here to discuss Corydon. While looking at the covers, I think Miraidon had some pretty obvious guesses, but Corydon's typing was more of a mystery, with many possible theories. Like, what could this thing even be? But it wound up being Fighting and Dragon. This results in weaknesses to Psychic, Ice, Dragon, Flying, and a quad weakness to Fairy, but it does resist Fire, Bug, Water, Electric, Grass, Dark, and Rock, since really nothing cancelled out. And that's fine, but is the fighting type really the first thing that you think of when you imagine the far past? I mean, we've been trained to think of the rock type with the fossils, but Corydon can only learn ancient power, so that doesn't make sense. Plus, it's not here from being a fossil. It was ripped straight from the past times. But I do think that it could get away with having the ground type. It gets plenty more ground-type moves than rock, and the whole point of this creature is getting down in the dirt and galloping all over the place. It runs and climbs all over the region, kicking up dust wherever it goes. I know that it can also fly and surf, but those are actual moves that it could learn. Gallop is not a move, it's just something inherent about this creature, and I don't know that the fighting type has all that much to do with travel. So ground is weak to water, grass, and ice, and it resists poison and rock and is immune to electric. The 3 of them together would be weak to psychic, flying, dragon, and quad weak to fairy and ice, with some resistances to fire, bug, poison, dark, quad resists rock, and is totally immune to electric. You might think that that's unfair given Miraidon being an electric type, but they've still got dragon to hit each other super effectively, so it's not so imbalanced. And frankly, it gives the past variant something else cool to bring it up to an even playing field with its future brother. Number 2, Ironmoth. It's not just the past Paradox Pokemon that could have more on their plate. I honestly kind of forget Ironmoth because I mostly just think of Slitherwing, which is noteworthy as the only other one besides Donphan to come from both time periods, but somehow this future robot is a poison type? Okay, I mean, I don't understand where they're keeping their poison next to their circuitry, but that's fine. I also think that it would fit for this Moth of Christmas Yet to Come to be part flying type. You might say that that's dumb because things can fly without being a flying type, and that is true, but they also turned Hydreigon into a flying type in the future, and it was perfectly fine before being airborne without it. You could maybe say the bug type, but I feel like that was the point of the split, for one side to get each of the previous types. So that leaves the Ironmoth with the fire and poison typing, which makes it weak to water, rock, psychic, and quad weak to ground, but it does resist both fire, poison, ice, steel, fighting, and quad resist grass, bug, and fairy. And we already went over the flying type before with 3 weaknesses and 3 resistances and its immunity to ground, so if we put it all together, it would make Ironmoth weak to water, electric, psychic, and it trades the quad weakness to rock now, but that's alright because it would again resist fire and poison with steel, quad resist fairy and fighting, 8 times resist bug and grass, and end up being immune to ground. Did I pick the flying type just to take away the massive ground weakness? No, and a rock one did pop up to take its place anyway, but honestly Ironmoth could easily be a steel type as we mentioned, or it could retain the bug typing that it used to have. So the fact that it has at least 5 types that it could pull off means that this middle moth easily climbs the triple ranked ladder, or possibly even more, and who's to say that it's not a thing in the far future anyway. Number 1, Earthworm. Right from when I first saw Earthworm, well, I really liked it for one and put it on my team, but I also found it quite strange that this was a pure steel type. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being pure steel, it still seems relatively rare compared to other solo types out there, and it is pretty good as we saw before, with only 3 weaknesses, but 10 resistances and an immunity. So it's not like Earthworm is in trouble, but it could just be a little bit more. It might be hard to tell, but Earthworm is actually a worm, which to me means that it could be part bug type. And some people still don't seem to get it, so I have to say this, but the bug type is not just the insect type. The term bug is intentionally more generic. Otherwise, none of the arachnids would count in that type either. So even if it is based on an invertebrate, a worm still falls into the bug category. Isn't that right, Wormpole? Anyway, the other type that I could see Earthworm being is in fact ground. When you encounter the Titan Earthworm, its whole deal is burrowing underground. With great speed, mind you, and I can only assume the main reason it wasn't also part ground type is because they already had a Titan covering that as well. Not to mention all the ground type attacks that are staples in Earthworm's moveset, so I think that Earthworm could have been at least one of those types, if not both. Bug and ground together are weak to water, fire, ice, and flying, and they resist ground, poison, fighting, and are immune to electric. So if you put it with the original steel, you get a weakness to water and a quad weakness to fire. All the rest cancels out. And remember that you'd still have those ground attacks to deal with the fire anyway. But it's even better with resistances to grass, normal, psychic, bug, dragon, fairy, rock, steel, and immunities to electric and poison. And you know, technically with the Earth Eater ability, Earthworm is immune to ground attacks as well. What a phenomenal makeup for this new Earthworm, and all just for adding some types that it already bears the attributes for. And it only makes sense that it actually be one or both of these extra elements, so to me, there is no better Pokemon from Generation 9 to easily embody 3 different types without changing anything else about it. So those are the top 6 Pokemon from the Paldea region I could see being triple typed. Which Gen 9 Pokemon do you think could be 3 types at once? Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And until next time, stay grounded.